Okay, so whereas with 3.2 we were with expressions, you'll see now today's lesson 3-3 is about equations, right? So now we add the equal sign and we solve. And so 3-3 is solving equations by using addition or subtraction. And before we get to these, and they start off pretty darn easy and they get super complicated, but the first thing that we're going to do is talk about the addition and the subtraction properties of equality. So the addition property of equality is something that you need to learn and memorize in both English and in math. So in English, the addition property of equality states that if you add the same amount to both sides of an equation, then the two sides remain equal, right? In math speak, when we do math, we have variables, and this comes in the form of an if-then statement, and you need to get used to these. You'll see these a lot. So if A equals B, and this is an equation, right? If A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. So notice how the English relates to the math, right? Here's the same amount being added to both sides of the equation, right? And the two sides are remaining equal. Now, I've given kind of a silly answer, or silly example, because it doesn't solve the equation, but I do want to relate this back to what you did in Ms. Tedeschi's class, potentially in 4th grade, where you did hands-on equations, right? Let's say that we have the equation x plus 1 equals x plus 1. So on this side, we have x, and then we have a 1. Maybe the 1 could be one little ball. And on this side, we have x and we have a ball. And then we want to add something. In this case, we're going to add 4 balls to both sides. So now we're going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The two sides are still equal according to the addition property of equality because we've added the same amount to both sides. Now, this doesn't really get us anywhere, this x plus 5 equals x plus 5, but we can now introduce the concept of inverse operations. So where this might come in handy, right, this addition property of equality, is, well, if we wanted to undo subtraction, because addition and subtraction are what's called inverse operations, right? They undo one another. So if we had a different example, say x minus 4 equals 6, I think you already probably know the answer, and you did some of these with Mr. Forenger, right? But we could use the addition property of equality and say, hey, we can add 4 to both sides, not upset the seesaw here, have the two sides remain equal according to the addition property of equality. Over here on the left, you can see that these are inverse operations and they cancel each other out, they undo one another. And now, right, we have solved the equation, right? We have come up with the value for the variable that makes the equation true. So now let's look at the other one, which is the subtraction property of equality. So this one, very similar language to the addition property of equality, right? Now, just have a couple of new words here. If we subtract the same amount from each side of the equation, the two sides remain equal. That's it in English. In math, remember we have what's called an if-then statement, right? So if A equals B, then A minus C equals B minus C, right? So here's our initial equation. The two sides are equal, right? And then we are going to subtract the same amount, and that's shown here by C, right? The same amount from both sides, and that equation, those two sides are going to remain equal. How might we use this to solve an equation? Well, here's a very simple equation, right? X plus 3 equals 5. Remember, we can undo addition with subtraction, so we take away 3 from both sides, Okay, on the left, we have x plus 3 minus 3, and on the right, we have 5 minus 3. Won't even make you convert this to adding the opposite right now. X equals 2. We have solved the equation. We have found the value for the variable that makes the equation true. If you don't believe me, right, put it back in up here, and you can see when we substitute in 2 for x, right, we get an equation that works. Remember, this can also look like on our little seesaw, right? What did we start with? We started with over here an x and 3. And then we started with, on this side, 5, right? And then we took away 3 from each side. So get out my little eraser here. Took away 1, 2, 3. Took away 1, 2, 3. Look what we're left with. Okay, we're left with x on one side and 2 on the other. So those are equal. So as we move forward, these equations are going to get more and more complicated, and I want you to think about a strategy, and that strategy entails asking yourself 2 questions. So the first question is, what is being done to the variable? And then the second question is, whatever that is, how can I undo that? Right? So the equation that we just had, it was pretty simple, all right? Only one thing was being done to the variable. 3 was being added to it, right? How do I undo that? Well, you undo addition with subtraction. So we took away 3. We used the subtraction property of equality, and we were left with the variable being what I would call isolated, right? All by itself, okay, on one side of the equation. And so that's kind of how we solve an equation. It'll get more complicated from here, but this is solving equations by addition and subtraction.